Hello, and welcome to another episode of Expert Talks. Today, we are very lucky to have our expert, Ann Reynolds, here to chat through the 6 common mistakes made when filing your TTB 5120 report. As a reference, here it is on the screen. I will also link it in the comments below this video. This episode will benefit anyone who is submitting this report to the TTB. And just a quick disclaimer, I always like to say this information presented is for educational purposes only, and it's not intended or meant to be understood as legal advice. All right, now that we got that out of the way, today, like I said, we are very lucky to have Ann Reynolds with us as our featured expert. Ann is an experienced winery compliance professional who has been in the wine industry for 30 years. Ann, can you give us a little bit about your background and how you found yourself in the wine compliance world?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on here. I'm very glad to be here sharing this information that can benefit every winery in the country. Yeah, I started out actually 1993 was my very first harvest at a winery. So that was, if you will, the beginning of my wine career. I started doing compliance, which was tracking. Everybody, well, a lot of people will know the word tracking in 1998, and that was at Sterling Vineyards in Calistoga. So I was in the perfect place really to learn winery compliance, even though I didn't know it at the time because I had all sorts of questions, and I basically kind of had to figure it out on my own, little by little by little over the years while I was working at wineries. So that was a large reason why I started the business in 2009, at least for a part of the emphasis was on providing information, all this information that I had been looking for once upon a time in the training and understand how to file a report like we're talking about today.
Awesome. I love hearing about your story and how you ended up being here and being this expert in wine compliance. So let's jump in. I know that you have prepared the 6 most common mistakes people make when submitting their TTB reports and how to avoid them, the most important part, right?
Yeah.
So together we will walk through these steps and we'll outline ways that you can ensure you're submitting this important document correctly and ways to avoid any penalties or fees. And I'm sure many of you watching are dealing with submitting your annual, quarterly, or monthly report right now. So this information will be very helpful and useful to help you streamline your process. All right, and let's start off with mistake number 1. What is it?
So this one is that the report is being signed by somebody who does not have the authority to do so. So by that, I mean they don't have either power of attorney or signing authority with the TTB.
Okay.
So yeah, that's mistake number one. And this
Okay.
one has, as we'll elaborate here further on in the presentation, if you, by the way, this is one of the ones talked about where this mistake can't happen if your winery is using the platform pay.gov to file this report, because pay.gov will not give you an account unless you already have TTB, power of attorney, or signing authority already on file.
Wow, that seems like it would be a lot easier if you just filed online then.
World easier. So basically, folks, this only applies to businesses that are sending in a hard copy of their report in the mail, meaning a wet signature on that signature line. Can't
Okay.
happen if you use pay.gov.
So I have a question that may be a more basic question, but um, if the mistake is being signed by somebody who doesn't have the authority, who are the people who have the authority and how do you become that person?
So the people who have the either power of attorney or signing authority are established on any winery's TTB permit. What's called more specifically their entity file.
Mm.
I mean, this is obviously certainly another conversation that any winery should have access to its TTB permit file, regardless if they're working with an office like mine to manage it for them. Somebody on the winery should always have access to it. So they already have whoever that is. When they set up their winery, they set up these power of attorneys, these signing authority details. Then, as a new staff member comes on who's going to be filing, say, this report, the 5120, perhaps what would make the most sense is they then set up a power of attorney for that employee and file it with their TTB basic permit. So power of attorney is specific to individuals by name. So any given employee, for example.
Mhm.
Signing authority can be set up by title, president, winemaker, things
Mm.
like that, just as an FYI.
That's a
So if,
great
for example,
designation.
if it was your winemaker who filed the report, as long as the signing authority was set up by title with winemaker, it wouldn't matter when, the new winemaker came in and the previous one left. It'd still be covered to file it.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
And so now we understand who has the authority to sign this form and the two ways that you can submit this form, either in the mail or electronically. Let's move on to mistake
Mhm.
number 2. What is it?
So mistake number 2 is that wineries are not filing the report as often as they're required to do so. TTB
Ah,
has 3 filing frequency options. The longest one is annually. And then it goes up from there to quarterly, and then up from there to monthly. And what
mhm,
determines the whether or not a winery qualifies for, say, the longest? We'll start with the longest one, annually. So it's 2 items. The first is about how their amount of what we call in bond gallons sitting at their winery site. And so for the annual period, that you can't have more than 20,000 gallons of in-bond wine, and that includes wine that's bulk wine, so sitting in tanks or barrels or what have you, and
mhm.
if you also have some in-bond bottled wine sitting at your winery site. Can't have more than 20,000 gallons sitting there in any month in a given calendar year. If you're less than that, plus item number 2, qualification number 2, is you can't owe more than $1,000 in TTB excise taxes for the year. So it's 2 items. It's no more than 20,000 gallons in bond, no, and can't owe more than $1,000 in excise taxes. So if you're above either of those, then you got to bump up to the quarterly filing.
I see.
Quarterly cutoff amounts are 60,000 gallons.
Okay.
And you can't, this one has always been hysterical to me because it goes from, you can't owe more than $1,000 in excise taxes. It goes at the quarterly level, you can't owe more than $50,000 in excise tax, which I can
Wow.
tell you the majority of wineries in this country are nowhere near that.
Yeah, what a big jump. Interesting.
I
Maybe
know
a
who came up
typo
with that.
happened a long time ago.
Yeah. So then that's if you're, say, for example, if you have more than 60,000 gallons of in bond wine, then you would have to be filing the report monthly.
Okay.
But yeah, annually, quarterly, or monthly.
Great. So if you're watching this, you might want to double check your gallon sitting in bond right now and make sure that you are filing your report often enough.
Which can
Okay.
be determined by looking at previously filed copies of this report. That's where those numbers come from.
Ah,
Mhm,
see?
mhm.
It all works
And it
together.
all starts coming together.
All right, Anne, hit me with mistake number
All
3.
right, mistake number 3 is wineries are not filing amended reports when they need to.
Ah, okay.
And yeah, when might they need to do that? Basically, it's if you've, say I filed my report for November of 2024, and then basically say, for example, so the winemaker or somebody from the cellar staff comes and informs me, oh, we forgot to let you know that we actually bottled this other wine, or something was either missed, it was not included that should have been included,
Mhm.
is one of the primary examples, or the numbers that were provided that went onto that report, created that report, were wrong, were just wrong for whatever reason. They were higher, they were lower. So
Okay.
those are any number of scenarios you might imagine related to that, which means you then have to go back in and file an amended report, which here again, another plug for pay.gov. It's extremely easy, folks, to file an amended version of a report if you use pay.gov. You just find that, the original version of that report, you click one button in there and you go through and you make the few changes, and then you save it as an amended. It will be documented that way on the report itself as an amended version. Extremely easy. Where if you're still in that paper world, you'd have to start from scratch.
Wow, what a simple thing. And
Yeah.
I'm sure people can easily adopt over to the online version, especially
Yes.
if they are having to file amended reports more often. And I can only really imagine the trickle effect of not filing the amended reports
Yeah.
would have on your numbers and really making
Yes.
them not match and causing headaches further down the road. So, um,
Exactly. Yeah.
that that really leads us perfectly to the next mistake. And which one is mistake number 4?
Oh, right. This is a classic. Your beginning on hand number. So again, say if I was staring at filing my November
Mhm.
2024 report right now, my on hand beginning numbers don't match what were my on hand end inventory numbers from my October report.
Ah,
So this is why I always recommend to anybody who files this report, when you're ready to file your next one that's due, always have the last one that you just filed up and available. So you can pluck those on-hand inventory numbers, the end of the previous report, and plop them onto your line 1 on-hand beginning. Because you think about it, you're like kind of like reading these reports like a book. They have to
yeah,
connect to each other. And like you were just commenting, Lauren, that would throw, if you didn't, that could potentially mean your numbers get thrown off.
definitely.
You know, you're not, because this report is basically a version of a balance sheet, which is something else we're going to talk about in a few seconds here. So, the numbers, two sets of kind of a balance sheet, the amounts causing your numbers to go down and the amounts causing your numbers to go up.
Yeah. That seems like a pretty straightforward mistake, but I'm sure it gets messed up quite often. And what do you do when it is messed up and you don't find out for like 1 or 2 months?
Yeah, that would probably be, in most cases, going to be an example where you have to go back and file amended reports.
Great.
Yeah,
See, again, this is all coming together full circle.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
I
all
love
this
when
stuff
that
is all tied
happens.
together.
Well, now let's move on to mistake number 5. What do you got, Anne?
All right. Okay, so this one um, is that at times, and I've seen this on more than one occasion, where a winery has listed gallons on line 2 in part A, which is titled produced by fermentation. They listed gallons there, but they never listed what I call corresponding numbers in part 4 of the report, which is the section titled materials received and used. I like to call it the harvest section. So
Okay.
that's basically if a winery is listing gallons on line 2 produced by fermentation, then that means that they would have had to have received in some fruit, some
Hmm.
pounds of grapes or whatever it might be, or like another example, they might have received in some bulk juice and
Yeah.
then initiated fermentation. But all of that information, either you're receiving in fruit or receiving in juice, those numbers first show up on this report in part 4. So again,
Okay.
if you want to, this isn't sounding familiar to anybody watching, just glance back at that screenshot of the report and take a look at part 4, materials received and used.
That's great. And I think that that one is or can get a little confusing.
Yeah,
I have a follow-up question. So this reporting the like weight in and the gallons listed in line 2, is that double reporting your wine when you enter in the gallons and the pounds, or like how does that work? Or
right.
like how can I think through that?
No, I mean, that question completely makes sense because it can kind of give that impression.
Hmm.
However, it's not.
Okay.
Part 4 is where, as like I said, I like to call it the harvest section. So that's where when you're receiving in fruit or you're receiving in, like I said, because a lot of sites will do this, it'll just come to them not as a delivery of grapes, but rather literally as a delivery of juice that hasn't started fermenting yet.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you think about the beginning product that any winery ferments, that's where their life starts on this report is part 4. They're
Okay.
receiving in pounds or they're receiving in gallons. And then those amounts go through fermentation. And then when the winery decides, they've completed their fermentation, they become wine at that point. That's when those gallons get listed on produced by fermentation. Again, using a platform such as InnoVint, they have a data entry step in there that generates when those gallons populate. I think it might be the tax class change data entry
Hmm.
or something related to that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This is making me see how incredibly important it might be to file quarterly, even if you qualify
Mhm.
for annual reporting, as
Yeah,
you're only going to be using section 4 during like one part of the year during the
exactly.
harvest.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually a big proponent of that as well. Even if you
Hmm.
qualify to file annually, it's actually a lot easier because if you're waiting over a year's period of time, it's so much easier to miss things or forget about things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, awesome. Well, we're already at our last mistake. I can't believe this. What is number 6?
Number 6 is what we call submitting an out of balance report. And
Ah.
this is the last one that it has the asterisk of this can't happen if you're using pay.gov. So as I referred to earlier, the different parts of this report are essentially like balance sheets.
Mhm.
So it has, each section has 2 total lines. So it's summing 2 sections and the total lines must always match. And so if
Mhm.
they don't, for whatever reason, that's an example of an out of balance report. And like I said, that's one of the other big advantages of using the pay.gov online filing platform is if for some reason, because this still happens to me every now and then when I'm plopping in numbers on that, and then I click next, it'll just come up with this statement and it'll highlight the total lines. It'll say, line 31 doesn't match line 2 or whatever it is. That's an example of an out of balance report.
Okay, so say that happens and you're filing online.
Mhm.
How do you fix this if you're getting this error message?
Well, I mean, I can tell you one of the most common ones that I see is like just the gains and losses part of it.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if it can be the difference in the amounts can be off by 1 gallon or 3 gallons, small amount, they still don't match.
Yeah.
So gains and losses is a common one that I see. There's a couple of other ones. So basically say for example, gains and losses, I just simply go in and I massage the number to get it to
Mm.
the right math. So maybe I need to increase the gains by a little bit, or I need to decrease the losses, or whatever it is to get the math to balance. It can also, but it can also be a way to catch that you missed something too. Like, oh, that's right. I didn't include those gallons we received in bond, that truck of bulk wine that came in, or oh, that's right, I didn't include all of the gallons that we bottled. It can also be an opportunity for that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully it doesn't go back very far though, which is another benefit to filing more regularly. So if mistakes happen, you don't have to sift through a ton of data throughout the year.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that was extremely insightful and very, very helpful action items that you presented. And I always like to open this part of the series up. So what should people do now that they have this info, and how can they contact you to stay in touch if they
Mhm.
have more questions?
Yeah, so my office provides ongoing training opportunities. So related to that, actually, in 2025, we do plan to launch a series of training webinars. And so those will be opportunities. Some of those will be about the 5120.17. Other topics will include items such as label design,
Mm.
label approval, excise taxes, all these popular topics.
Yeah.
But yes, they can find my business at winecompliancealliance.com. I highly recommend if they're interested in any of these areas that they subscribe, because a little pop-up box will come up where they can put in their name and their email address, and then they'll be in the loop for my ongoing updates for trainings and other kinds of opportunities to work with my office.
That's lovely. And please share those trainings on the punch down so members can stay
Exactly.
tuned.
You betcha.
Well, thank you so much for making sense of compliance for us, Anne, and thank you for your time and your expertise. That was another episode of Expert Talks, and I encourage you to keep the conversation going in the comments below or reach out to Anne directly on the punch down. Until next time, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.